Welcome to another episode of Hard Work Beats Talent, where we aim to draw upon the insights of some of our inner circle in order to help our listeners learn from their wisdom as well as their mistakes. I'm Alex, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Nikki. How's it going?
I'm good, thanks, Alex. I'm good. Time of recording, it's Easter weekend, so lots of feasting and, joyful time with the family. So yeah, it's been lovely, man.
Good stuff. So today we are pleased to be joined by our good friend and member of our inner circle, Josh.
Welcome, Josh.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Should probably add it's also 10:30 a.m. on a Monday Easter bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, I think we ruined a few people's mornings on a bank holiday Monday.
Yeah, here we are. So Josh, I know who you are, but for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, give us a brief elevator pitch on who you are, like what you do and where you're from.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up, in the grand scheme of things, not too far from here, so over in Reading. My dad was Turkish, is Turkish. My mum's fully English, so I'm half and half. And moved to London 7 years ago now for work. I began in consulting, so with a strategy focus as a grad on the grad scheme. Did that for around 3 years and then moved to an in-house corporate strategy role at a financial services firm, which was great, loved it, and changed role 2 months ago now, although I've only actually been in the role for 1 month as I took some time off in between, which was amazing. So yeah, that's it.
That's amazing. Sounds really interesting. So in terms of what you do now, can you give us a bit of an insight into the industry you work in and the sector that your employer serves? Yeah,
of course. So, well, my employer serves a lot of different sectors. So they're they're global and serve from pension schemes to manufacturers to renewable energy producers. Really a global focus. But what the firm does specifically is build and manage funds for investors to access capital markets in a nutshell. What that means in practice is essentially redistributing capital from areas where it's stagnant to areas where it can hopefully grow more over time.
Okay.
So that it'll be interesting to see what you guys think, and I don't know how true it is, but there's an idea in the investment management industry that what we're doing is actually a very beneficial thing from a societal perspective. We're making the capital markets work more efficiently.
So put in money in industries and sectors where maybe there's a lack of funding. Yeah. So, for example, sorry, a bit of a segue, but so I worked in renewable energy for a little while on the legal side as a lawyer in that area. But we were developing utility scale solar farms, and it was at a time where there were like huge government subsidies. So it was commercially viable for a developer to develop and build a solar farm. Because we had the subsidies which worked into the business model.
Okay, yeah.
But then the Conservatives came in and they cut the subsidies, and there was a whole regime change in how that worked. And the business model kind of fell apart to a large extent unless companies hugely reinvented themselves. So is that the kind of thing you're talking about, like in sectors like that where maybe it's not commercially viable, your organisation may put more capital in that?
Sadly, that would be over-egging the kind of good value that we give to the society. It's based on what we expect to be enhanced returns over time. If we think, as we do with renewable energies, that there's a good chance that anything we invest in now will be more valuable in 5 to 10 years' time, then we're there. Unfortunately, it's not just for if there's a funding gap, we come in and say, here, we're going to meet.
Oh, yeah, of course, it's got to be viable.
Yeah.
There's got to be profits.
That is the fundamental decision that we make, and it's only based on that. But I think it does occasionally serve a very good social function as well, but I might be brainwashed, so who knows.
Drawing the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, drawing the Kool-Aid.
So you've kind of briefly touched upon it, and you mentioned prior to your current role working in strategy. I think given that you have experience of both, it'd be good for our listeners to understand a bit more about what your strategy role looked like day to day, and then what your current role looks like day to day, and in particular drawing out any differences.
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I was a strategy consultant, very, very different day to day. Do you mean when I'm at BlackRock, the difference between in-house strategy versus?
Yeah, that, and then also you're like, by the sounds of it, in a more kind of business/investor role right now, right? So the differences between, say, the strategy work that you did both in-house and in private practice, and then also how those differences are drawn out between, say, what you do now and strategy role.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So in the in-house strategy role, your job is to be an expert in your business, the company you work for, and know in and out how it works, the different stakeholders in the different areas of the business, how they work with each other, what the value proposition of the different teams is, and then always try and connect that with the outside world as well. So, okay, this is how we're positioned, but how is the financial services industry going to look in 5 years' time? What are the key trends we're seeing emerging? And trying to tweak the business to match where we think the market is going. That's really hard, and a lot of that is to do with relationships and how you can influence and persuade, and you're generally dealing with a more senior audience, because they're the people who are going to make the decisions around the firm strategy. So day to day was a lot of market analysis, and it was very data driven. So where's the money flowing to over the next 5 to 10 years? How are we positioned? Is there anywhere that we need to change our proposition in order to capture more market share? And really, thinking about the future and how how we need to position ourselves in that future. Now, and again, I'm only a month into the new role, but it's a very different focus, and the senior audience is less there. So I work with one of the managing directors, but I don't have that kind of constant senior attention on the work I'm doing, and it's become a lot more detailed. And I think in a strategy function, you benefit from the ambiguity around it. No one can tell you now how it's going to be in 5 years' time. So you don't necessarily need to have that kind of level of detail and scrutiny over the tax regulatory law around the in my case funds we're structuring. Yeah. So very different focus, and more client focus as well, which I like to a degree.
And just to be clear, I think it wasn't necessarily as obvious from your initial answer, but your job or your company's role is to take money from external investors. And that can include retail investors.
Yep.
And then put that in particular industries. So, and typically would it be in, say, public companies, and even, say, debt that's issued by companies and government bonds and stuff. So it would, I don't know if it, say, invest in gold or commodities as well, but it would take that money from investors, put it into different areas according to what it thinks the future is going to look like, so that those investors have their money grown over time, and then you take, say, a performance fee or a management fee as a consequence of that. Just
exactly right. Yeah, and all of the asset classes you mentioned cover all of them, even private assets as well. So private equity, private debt, we invest there as well. But yeah, that's exactly it.
And then in terms of your actual role, when you were a strategy consultant, that was perhaps broader than financial services, or was that limited to financial services?
No, that was broader. I did do one project with a building society in the UK, which was financial services focused. But again, we were not coming at it from a financial perspective. We were coming at it from a business strategy perspective, but far broader industry scope than what I do now.
Okay.
Sorry, were you finished?
I was just going to try and, because I'm
building a good picture, so
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
You explained it way better than I did.
I've listened to you over the time, but mindful that some of our listeners, and even myself, wouldn't necessarily get this straight away, and I want them to be clear on what the picture is, so that as we go into detail as to what your role actually involves, it's a bit clearer. But just taking a step back, we're talking about taking money from people and investing it. And then prior to your current role, that was providing strategy consultancy services to different companies in different sectors. You then moved in-house, so to the financial services role, where you were doing that on behalf of that company. So always looking to the future and working out how best to position that company, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So question I have then is, when you're doing that sort of strategy aspect of your role, how did you did you get into that initially? Because, you know, like if someone's, say, at university or finishing university, they might think, well, I want to go into strategy consultancy. We'll start with that. Where do they look and where do they start in order to take that leap?
Okay, yeah. So my motivation was I didn't really know what I wanted to do in 5 to 10 years' time. And a friend of my brother had started in consulting, and I'd spoken to him about it and got some idea of what the industry did. Very, very high level, but some idea. And I knew that the exit opportunities were pretty soon. So most consultants have a 2-3 year tenure and then move on to something else.
Completely different.
Something completely different.
It's often out of consultancy.
Out of consultancy.
Oh, okay.
It's often private equity and some kind of industry which benefits from a strategy skill set. But it can be anything. I know people have set up ice cream shop in New York. It can be anything.
But it gives you quite a good skill set, right?
It's a very broad, generic skill set which you can sell and apply in a lot of different areas. So I think for somebody getting into it, I would start by looking at the consulting case studies. So it's quite a unique interview process to get into consulting, where it's not the normal behavioral type questions. How would you react if they give you often a real life project which they've worked on, one of the interviewers, and will ask you to talk through the problem solving steps which you would take to solve the client's problem. So it's a very different way of interviewing, and you obviously need to be good at it to get in, but it will give you a very good flavor of it will be what my day-to-day is like, and start building the way of thinking and communication which you need in consulting.
Okay. I mean, is there a resource or a way of sort of doing that case study work? Is there the materials out there?
YouTube is. I was looking at this not too long ago, and all of the top consulting firms have now released videos, full case study interviews, and how to succeed. So you can't really go wrong just looking at that, understanding the way that they talk, and then going from there.
The language.
University of YouTube, eh?
Yeah.
No,
just get everything on there. Don't underestimate the power of YouTube.
3 people that have gone to university, in terms of where we go for our additional learning, probably YouTube's a big resource, right?
Huge.
Oh, massive. And for everything, you know, work related, something goes wrong at home, YouTube. It's such a resource.
We had our car battery went dead, and we managed to change it. Like, went and bought one ourselves, changed it, and they've saved ourselves like 150 quid just through and then actually, key tip on that, I know this is completely off topic, but record. If you're ever found in that position, record yourself doing it so you know where absolutely everything goes.
Nice. That's a good one.
I'd share that.
Very major hack.
And then post it on YouTube.
In fact,
give back.
We small anecdote about Josh and YouTube.
That's why I was asking about the screen.
So actually, that kind of does tie into your strategy, and I guess it leads into your interest in chess and jiu-jitsu, which I'm sure we can come on to. But small anecdote about Josh is that he's got his own YouTube account, right? Which has how many views now?
Last time I checked, it was 3.7 million. So
no way.
We'll do the link in the description.
Yeah. Literally went viral.
It went. I mean, it's been there for 10 years now, so I'm kind of cheating with that length of time. But yeah, it went real viral.
Dude, can you post our stuff?
Yeah, if you want a platform. I've got a built fan base of people who are very angry about the video. I'm playing a mini pool table, and I play a perfect game, which is what I titled the video, but there's actually a few fouls throughout, and the comments are so vitriolic about the fouls. They're like,
really?
No, I get them every day, like timestamps. You fouled here, it's not a perfect game. Gets very abusive.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
Why are you so angry?
Welcome to the online world.
Yeah.
But we digress. So back to asset management, strategy consultancy. By the sounds of it, strategy gives you a really broad skill set, which allows you to then move into other areas, which is something you decided to do. But it'd be interesting to know what sort of skills you think are key for each role, and whether those skills came naturally to you, or were they things that you developed either consciously or unconsciously over time?
Honestly, a mix. Some things I think I have naturally, some you need to learn. I imagine for any role it'll be similar. You have things you're good at and then work on the things which you're less good at.
I think that's quite, sorry, Josh, I think that's quite pervasive, isn't it? Across a lot of the guests we have on, is like everyone has a mix of things they're born with that they're innately good at and they nurture over time. And then when they go into a particular role, they have to build certain skill sets, maybe where they're a bit weaker, which is like a demonstration that you have to grow and develop in order to improve.
You're not being pushed if you don't have to work on any of your skills. It's just, I'm coasting.
And sorry to interrupt, but on that, I think it'd be really something I always tell my younger sibling and kind of younger cousins as they're looking to embark on their respective careers is, it's a bit like, say, gym work or exercise. Like, if you want to see results, you have to put the work in, except you don't see the results. It's all in your like kind of mind. Yes, there are things you can see in terms of someone's a better communicator or if they can write well, but it's all kind of stuff you don't see, which I think is something to stress, because you can look at people and think, oh, like, how have they got there, or like, why do they get that salary or whatever? But what you don't see is the years of kind of compounding work in terms of their skills and the things that they are able to do, such that they are equipped for roles which do perhaps reward them better than, say, you might think on first look. So I just wanted to dwell on that point.
It's a really good point, and I would add, and it's something I felt or noticed transitioning from university to the world of work, is you go to the gym, you feel sore the next day, you know you've done a workout. Even at university, you submit a piece of work, you do an exam, you get your score back, you know how you've done. You start work and there is that feedback loop just doesn't really exist.
There's no metrics.
There are no metrics. People are very stressed and very busy and they're not really spending the time, or at least in my case, maybe better managers do, but not spending the time to sit down and say that you could have done X, Y, Z better, or you're doing really well at this. And that takes some adjustment, I think, from studying to the world of work, is not getting...
And just to clarify on that, you're talking about your management style, not your manager's management style, right?
I'm talking about my management style.
Good. Just in case your manager's watching, Josh isn't firing shots.
I don't speak to them anymore. It's my first role.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But I think it's important to stress that it's even more important to go to your managers or whoever are your peers to receive feedback or request feedback, and ask if there's something that you feel that you're maybe not particularly strong at, or you have a weakness in a particular area, that you go to them and ask them for help. Because like you say, once you leave school, university, or that education, that structured system, no one's really out here trying to look after you other than like your parents, maybe.
Exactly.
No one's going to come to you and say, hey, do you want some help with this or that? You know, because everyone's so focused and busy with their own stuff. If you want to grow and develop, you have to go and make the conscious effort.
It's yourself. A really good point. And I didn't, but you definitely should. I think you need to go and proactively ask them for it, otherwise it's not happening.
100%. And one thing I did in my previous role, and I've actually taken into my new role, is every few weeks, so we like 6 weeks in my old role, it's now like every 2 weeks in my new role, I have a catch up with my line manager to talk about what I've done. So I plan to send them the work I've done, and in terms of like, I've worked with these people and on this, please speak to them before I catch up, so that I can then get that feedback in real time. So it's like imposing the structure that I suppose goes missing after education, so that you can, yes, it can be a bit harsh sometimes to hear, okay, this could have gone a bit better, or that could have gone this way, but you can then adapt your approach so that going forwards it's better than it would have been had you not had that conversation. So again, something to maybe think about for people listening. If you are finding that you don't have the structure you would like in terms of your feedback loop, you can impose it yourself, and more often than not, if you say to someone, I want to put something in your diary every 2 to 6 weeks, then they're very unlikely to say, oh no, I'm really busy in 6 weeks time.
In fact, it's incumbent on them. Right?
It's their job.
It's their job. Like that's what they're there for. So just going into skills, we diverted a little bit. So the sort of key skills that you think are important for this type of role, and
so
what you've fostered as well over time.
In the more focused strategy role, I think the key things are data synthesis and explanation. So can you look at a data set? It doesn't have to be complicated, but create meaning from that data set which you can communicate. So instead of saying, outflows in the asset management industry were 10 billion last year. Put that into context and say, post the COVID pandemic, investors have been making things make sense in a real world sense from data. I think that's key. Communication. All of your recommendations are as good as you can convince someone that they're true.
Is that written and verbal? Written
and verbal. It's you have to. You're not the person affecting the change. You're advising the people who are. In order to get their trust and buy-in, you need to be able to communicate well with them, succinctly explain what they need to know quite quickly.
And just on the written stuff, I think, am I right in saying that would be drafting emails? That would also be building decks,
exactly.
and that's something I'm going to definitely have to work on in my new role. But yeah, the ability to distill large amounts of data and say this is what it means and this is what we should do. It requires a lot of smaller skills on the inside of that. But yeah, just kind of wanted to draw that to the audience's attention as well. It's not just can you write an email and convince someone. It's often building a whole picture and set of slides to show them what it is you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. But building a narrative around is very key.
Any other skills come to mind?
I think you mentioned problem solving.
Problem solving, yeah. I don't really know what that means though. I in consulting that's always number one usually on the list is problem solving, but I don't really get what that means. Is it understanding a problem, being able to reason in a group? Probably. I think there's a team aspect to problem solving,
true.
But other than thinking through something, I've never. My manager said to me before, like, "Oh, you're a good problem solver," and I said, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Can you think about it from the perspective of what it doesn't mean? Like, if someone, would you have an example of, say, poor problem solving skills? Like, if someone in your team did a piece of work which they hadn't, applied decent problem solving skills to, is that something you can talk to maybe, or you just?
I think it would go back to the point around turning. Explaining versus recommending in a way. So not just depicting what's happening by looking at the data, doing your market analysis, talking to the experts and describing what's happening in a market.
Yeah.
I think what's key is the layer of interpretation, which is based on this information, we should do X, Y, Z. That might be what is the problem solving is not just giving or understanding the problem, but thinking around a solution to it. Maybe it's that, but yeah, it's never something I've thought about or like tried to work on in terms of one of my own skills.
It may be something that just comes naturally.
I think that might be the case.
Yeah,
because I think some people are just naturally better problem solvers. Like they can see like almost like a hypothesis. Oh, okay, this is not functioning how it should, whether it's something that's soft or physical or whatever, and they just in their mind the cogs start turning to kind of resolve those issues. And what I would imagine is key is, when you kind of touched on it, is relationships, because along with that communication element, you probably need to build that trust and the relationships with the people that you're advising as well,
100%.
So that they think, right, actually they know what they're doing. They have a good ability to analyze data accurately and build this picture, and they articulate themselves well. And so I think relationships that's always quite an important one, but probably more so in this case.
Massively so. And you hit the nail on the head. Is they just need to trust you. That's what you need to gain when you're dealing with generally a very senior audience. They don't have the time to waste.
Well, actually, so I watched a video of it recently, and I think it was Jeff Bezos that said it. He said that being like a senior executive, you're not making.
I saw the same thing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was like you're not making or there to make a huge number of decisions.
Yeah.
He said you're kind of relying on people to advise you, and you're there to make like 2 or 3
really well,
like really high quality decisions.
That's the word. Yeah.
So he said if in a day, if you can make 2 or 3 high quality decisions, then you've done your job as like a senior executive. So you coming in at that level where you're doing a lot of the work and working with lots of stakeholders, pulling together information, and then you come to them and help them make those high quality decisions.
Yeah.
And if they trust that you know what you're doing and you're competent, then they can make those decisions far more easily.
I would just add that he said that in the context of getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night.
Yes.
And justifying why he did. So for all of those,
true.
Despite the hard work beats talent,
you
can spend a lot of time in bed and still make those key decisions very well.
With hard work comes smart work, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You still got to rest and to be efficient.
So I haven't seen the video, and I really want to now. But,
try and dig it out for you.
No, please do. But I think what it makes me think about is the fact that by being the individuals that are helping senior stakeholders make these very kind of important and critical decisions, it sounds like very good training for when you kind of progress, like to hopefully be in with a shout of being a senior manager at one point in the future. So I imagine that's probably another benefit of strategy consultancy that we should dwell on, is that you are thinking about the decisions that matter.
Life strategy and career strategy. And I think we do that a lot in our lives, right? I think if people are quite conscious,
100%.
like we're always strategizing. So apply those skills into this
100%.
sort of,
So yeah, you've spoken about kind of skills that are required, and even touched upon it a little bit, but your journey. I'd be interested in knowing what your view is. I know you didn't do the grad scheme for asset management, but what the sort of application process was like to get into the role you are now, and if you could even speak about the grad process as well. I don't know if you're involved in that in your role as a slightly more senior individual.
Just looking at these questions and kind of when we were putting them together, I was kind of thinking almost working back, because we started this discussion and it sounds like a pretty big role that you have, and the two roles that you've had, they're quite intense, I would imagine, and require experience in as well. So I think it'd be really good to kind of like work back and think, where did Josh start kind of fresh faced, where all that sort of hard work, the long hours and stuff began. I'm sure there was a lot of that, and then work back to as Alex says, interview process, grad schemes, looking for grad schemes, like how did that go, all that type of stuff.
Can we swear on here? No.
Yeah.
Throw at the wall and see what sticks was the approach to the application. So I applied everywhere. I top 40 consulting firms, applied to every single one, at times with the same cover letters and CVs, which you shouldn't do, but just for the sake of time. So applied everywhere, got a couple of interviews. So I had my first consulting interview was one of the top firms. I've never had as bad an interview as that in my life. It was a car crash. Yeah. So they ask, it's the case study interviews, which I said earlier, and they outlined, it was a car manufacturer, this very complex business case, and I had nothing. I thought for a bit. It was the worst interview of my life. Obviously, didn't get to the next round. It was painful.
Okay.
So that was the first experience, and I was a little bit disheartened. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. This
but it must have given you a bit of a slap on the face as well, to be like, we need to do better.
We need to do better. let's do a bit more work. Then had an interview where the place where I eventually joined as a grad, and it was similar interview style with the case studies, and a bit more presenting. So they got you to present in a room with some of the other applicants, which was a funny.
That must have been a fun experience.
The dynamics of those kind of assessment center type experiences are interesting.
The competitiveness,
and we'll come on to this when we talk about your background, but you studied film, right?
Yeah.
So, without going into it in too much detail, but how did you find that? Because I'm sure there would have been people from, say, economics backgrounds and finance disciplines who might have had more kind of relevant degrees. Did you ever feel like that was a kind of thing that you had to overcome within yourself in terms of feeling comfortable in that process and just as qualified to say, do the job?
In the interview process, I didn't feel that. I actually felt that some of the skills which I would learn through film maybe actually benefited me more than the economics type skills for the interview process.
Such as?
Communication, narrativizing things, comfort with words, because interviews are ultimately talking to someone or building a relationship briefly. When I started work, I felt that a lot more, where I had no foundation in that kind of world around economics
and just touching upon the skills that you felt were better equipped you for the interviews. How would you say your degree and masters prepared you for like being better with words, etc.? Like, what do you think it was specifically about, say, the film degree and your masters? I think, was it philosophy, like a master's in philosophy you did?
It was a master of philosophy, but it was studying historiography in film.
So through writing essays, giving presentations, you felt like that's where you, say, honed those skills?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, for me, I'm sure you could have done this in any kind of discipline at uni, but engaging with the world of academia for the first time was really kind of enlightening for me, and understanding, how does knowledge get developed? Somebody writes a paper, they do some research, write a paper, people cite it, it starts getting traction, validated more and more. Seeing that process in action and being like a trainee within it at university, that gave me a lot of confidence in just understanding a bit better how knowledge is constructed. Reading all those complex texts as well obviously helps as well. But the degree was very kind of theory. My film degree was very theory focused. There wasn't much production involved, so I think I got to engage in that world for the first time, which you maybe don't do as much in economics, engineering, law. I don't know, but it gave me the confidence, I think, to express myself better.
So a couple of things there. Firstly, the degree you do, because from knowing you, I know you did what you did because it was what was most interesting to you. You probably could have done a number of things off the back of your A-levels, but you said, you know what, I'm most interested in film, went for that, did very well in that, and that didn't deter you or make you think, oh, okay, I've studied this and this is all I can do. A lot of people might feel like their degree defines where they can go. I know we've taken linear paths to an extent, like you did law and business, you're now involved in law and business. I studied law. It's only recently I've left the legal sector. But yeah, like Josh is a really good example of the fact that you can pursue your passions and then work out what it is exactly you want to do down the line. Still keeping it broad with strategy consultancy, but then moving eventually into asset management, which I know is a massive passion of yours. But kind of jokes aside, I think people should be encouraged by that, because what you do at a university, it's probably almost better to do what you're most interested in, and then you do still have time to work out what it is you want to do longer term. The other thing I wanted to mention was the fact that you were thankfully quite honest about your first interview experience at one of the biggest consultancy companies in the world, and that not going as well as you would like, but yet that's still not holding you back. And then also overcoming that doubt of, maybe I'm not good enough for this. I certainly had it whilst going through some of the application processes, and it's very much a natural thing that everyone probably will experience at times. That, am I good enough? You spoke about it a little bit in terms of your how you felt when you actually got to your role in as a grad, but overcoming that imposter syndrome, I think is something that is necessary. If you do want to keep kind of growing and developing, you're going to be in rooms which you're not overly comfortable being in, but that's just a natural feeling that you overcome with time.
I wouldn't say I've overcome it. I still feel it like to this day, and it's not maybe debilitating, but there's always that kind of grain of doubt in my mind. Am I really good enough? Are they going to catch me out one day? I don't fit in with these people, but that's a motivator as well. So.
How long have you been doing what you're doing now? I know you've had two roles, but over the course, how long have you been in?
It's like 3.5 years now. And, so in total, we started working the same time.
Yeah, so like 6.5 years.
6.5 years, 3.5 of those in my most recent place.
Oh, okay. Nice. And in terms of just that educational path, obviously you did something that was completely unrelated to what you do now. And as Alex said, it's commendable that you did what you wanted to, and then you still went and found something where you can excel, and there's a lot of scope for progression, all those types of things. Could someone, say, not go to university and gain some of the skills that we've talked about, that may have helped you with your interview process, for example?
100%.
Can you, say, skip university altogether and still get into consultancy or asset management?
I don't know if you can. I think they look
mostly they expect someone with a
based on a degree, which is so annoying. And we talk about this, like some of the mentoring we do outside of work, and you meet people who probably aren't going to uni, or it's not necessarily in their plan. They're some of the smartest, most capable people I come across. It's so annoying that there are apprenticeships and other schemes to get non-grads in, but vast majority of the time they're going to look at your CV, no degree, and you don't qualify. It's so annoying because 100%.
There's a lot of people
with
exactly. I mean, this is. I don't mean for this to sound disparaging. The degree that you did in sort of film, it's like in no way related at all. Yeah, it just kind of what it demonstrates is that you are able to, go to university. You're able to learn. You're able to, debate and write papers and research, and so you've got all those skills, and you're able to commit for 3 years as well. So it does. There are a lot of soft things that that it can demonstrate, but from an academic perspective, you could essentially go and do like an apprenticeship in carpentry for 2, 3, 4 years, and still gain a lot of really useful skills, intellectual skills as well as practical skills. But go on and do something like that, which. Well, it's interesting anyway. It's good for our listeners to know that if management, consultancy, or asset management is something you would like to consider, then you will probably have to go through the degree route. Yeah.
Unfortunately, but you probably will.
And just on that, for say listeners who might be doing their A-levels or GCSEs, are there particular programs in place that they could say access? I don't know if you know any off the top of your head, but for them to get experience, say, at your current firm or previous firm, like access schemes, so that they can then make that informed decision as to whether university does make sense given what the fees are these days.
I know of two off the top of my head. It's Bright City, Bright Future, which I think it's a week-long exposure program. You come in, follow people around the office, see some different teams, give you a flavour of what it will be like, and very useful when you ultimately apply to places to have those credentials. Then Into University is the other one, which is for A-level. I think even GCSE students who
into
university. They tend to be from non-privileged minority backgrounds. And when I was talking about some of the smartest people I meet, it's through this scheme where we help them with some of the university application process and thinking around what they want to do afterwards. Amazing people. But I think anyone can apply to the scheme. You may need to meet some eligibility criteria, but you could do it.
So we can probably maybe include some links in the show notes to those, and probably just do a Google as well. If what Josh is talking about sounds of interest, there will be access schemes for you to get on, and they will be really good ways of understanding a bit more about these industries and whether university makes sense as a kind of unfortunate but necessary stepping stone at the moment, at least, to get into those careers.
No, that sounds good.
So the other question we wanted to cover is what you've described. Yes, we're on Bank Holiday Monday, it's very relaxed, but it does sound very high pressure, and I feel like you are underplaying to an extent some of the daily pressures that you might have had to overcome, and the importance of resilience perhaps throughout this being an important factor in terms of success in your career. But it'd be interesting to hear about some of the biggest challenges you've faced, and how you've managed to overcome them to have a successful career.
Yeah, so I think that the two biggest, it's always been at the start. So when I began as a grad, adapting to a completely different lifestyle took me a while. I was used to university, had the masters. Suddenly you have no free time in a very high pressure environment. That changing my life to match work was a challenge.
So from the off, it was long hours.
Pretty much,
hours,
yeah. And then trying to upskill, because I felt I had no foundation in the business world. I had no idea what they were talking about. Needed to learn through osmosis. It comes with time, but that was very challenging, and I don't know how well I did it, but it just takes time to learn, to understand and familiarize with the new world you're in. And then similarly, when I moved to asset management with very little financial background and had to pretty much start from scratch, and I went in as a associate, so I had just one step up in terms of seniority. So they expect a bit more from you, and you can't really not have answers. They need you to have the answers all the time. It's not good enough if you don't. So again, adapting to that new world was tricky, but I had a genuine curiosity around it, which made it so much easier to eventually get up to speed with. So yeah, that adapting to completely new worlds, especially at a relatively more senior level, it gets challenging. So yeah, I think that they're the biggest.
Something I'm probably experiencing myself now, because my new roles I'm starting as an associate, and that expectation is that you're coming in with something to offer, and it's a career change entirely. So I feel your pain, and hopefully I can overcome it and be successful with where I am.
You will 100%.
Oh yeah, I think whenever you start anything new, there's always that initial feeling of, like you said, Alex, of like imposter syndrome, where you go through a bit of a confidence crisis and you think, am I cut out for this? Am I intelligent enough? You look at the people around you who are, seemingly like really talented. And what I think it's important to understand is that you have to push through, because that's the barrier of growth, right? Where you feel that, but you keep pushing through. Like you said, Josh, like you learn by osmosis, you have a support network around you, go to your manager, ask for help, and, to fill the gaps. And you would just start to learn your job. Something my mum actually always told me, like this was always a lesson, is like, it takes about 2 years to really settle in or understand your job.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Some people are like, oh yeah, 6 months, you need to like settle in. And like, I couldn't agree with her more, because it looking back at my 3 professional jobs I had since uni, it has taken me a good like 18 months to 2 years to really settle in, understand like the processes, the way the business operates and what they expect. Even like what I'm doing day to day, sometimes you need like the penny to drop, and it just takes that time. So don't be disheartened if it takes you a year, 18 months, 2 years to like fully understand what you're doing and learn the role.
I could not agree more. I remember hearing 6 months or so, and you should be competent. It takes way longer. Way longer.
Just overconfident, yeah.
And with that in mind, I think the key thing to be aware of, and it's something I keep telling myself now that I'm starting my new role, is patience. Because it is very easy to want to make an impact straight away and be useful, but a year, 2 years, whatever it may be, you need to have patience with yourself, and that's a kind of continual dialogue you're having to ensure that you're not putting yourself under too much pressure such that you don't perform because you're essentially giving yourself too much to handle too soon.
And remind yourself that those above you who you're wanting to impress probably have exactly the same view that we do. They've done it
just a different level
times already. They know it takes a long time. Don't let them implicitly stress you. They're the same.
I think in the context of the world we live in, down in London, in the city sort of landscape, people think 2 years, geez, I'll be moving on in 2 years, but you're still in that 2 year period. You're going through growth, and you're developing yourself. So if you get to 2 years, 2.5 years within your role at the place you're at, if you move on, you probably will realize, oh, actually, I'm 2 years better, professionally, than I maybe was expecting. So, even if you are taking that time, you will still be better.
There are different standards you hold yourself, or people hold themselves to as well. I see people come in and within 6 months or whatever, they're very confident and they can talk well, but maybe they don't have the full kind of foundation of knowledge which they need. And I'm someone who's not, I don't like talking about things I don't know about. I have to know a lot before I even want to open my mouth around it. So others might be different, but for me it takes a long time.
So just wrapping up on career now.
Sorry, Alex. Something came to mind. There's a saying. What's his name now? It'll come to me. But he says, when you open your mouth, you tell the world who you are, right? And it's so important to like just be mindful of don't speak for the sake of speaking. And I think that kind of overconfidence aspects when, some people want to, just really impress and over eager about impressing.
There was another quote I heard around it. It always stuck with me. It was, you'd rather sit there quietly and let people think you're stupid than open your mouth and remove any doubt.
Yeah.
That sticks in my mind a lot.
That is a really great quote. I like that.
No, very, very good and very on point. But yeah, so the final thing we wanted to perhaps speak about very briefly is any surprises that people might, or you've come across within your career, things that people might be really surprised about hearing about, say, strategy consultancy or asset management, or is it kind of as you would expect?
The thing I found most surprising is the interplay between the public and the private sectors, which I just did not get before I started working, and is really fascinating and gives a bigger purpose to what you're doing. I'd always, maybe again you're different with the legal background, but it kind of assumed that there was the public sector, the regulators, the law, whose job is to dictate the rules of the game, and then the private sector play the game. Having been in these industries, you see that it's such a back and forth dynamic with the extent of lobbying and it's not even lobbying, but a regulator, the FCA, require input from the banks, the asset managers, to enact any regulation which they plan to. Otherwise, they need to know what the main players of the game think about the rules they're setting. Seeing that interplay back and forth really surprised me and made what I do a lot more interesting to me, because there wasn't that distinction which I thought there was in my mind.
It's almost like it gives it a real life perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
As in, right, I can work in a private sector company, but it doesn't interplay with government and the centralized world kind of
real people.
Exactly. And I guess you're seeing that kind of aspects of, okay, what they do impacts what we do, and we have to play within the play the game within the rules.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? What you do impacts what they do.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes too much. You have to be careful what that balance of power is in a functioning society. But yeah, I found that surprised me a lot. I did not expect that.
That's really interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you came across this on your law degree, but we, on our constitutional course, learnt about something known as the separation of powers between states. So that's your government of the day, so would be the Conservatives now, Parliament, which is a mixture of all the elected MPs, and then also the judiciary, and then how they essentially act as checks and balances on one another. But by the sounds of what you're saying, and it's not something I've necessarily thought about too much, but there's almost like another element in that, and that's the actual, the private sector, as it were, and how they, I guess, impact those institutions as well. So, no, interesting thought and one to dwell on. Yeah. So I don't know if you had anything else on career.
No, I think that was quite a good breakdown of what you do and how to get into it, and some things people should consider. That want to go into it.
So one other thing we wanted to touch upon before we go into your background and how you got to where you are today is your passion for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it'd be interesting to hear about how you got into it and why you've continued it over the past number of years. Yeah,
it's a funny story how I got into it, actually, because I'd done some Muay Thai, a little bit of Muay Thai when I was 17, 18. And then I was at a dinner a year or two later, and I was sitting next to a guy I'd never met him before. He's 5'8", very skinny, smaller than me, and he was talking about the UFC and Anderson Silva and some of the other fighters. And I said, "Oh yeah, I know, I train Muay Thai." And he said, "Oh, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt." I said, "Oh, cool, yeah, I've heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know it." And he asked if I wanted to train with him the next day. So I said yes. Went to this muddy field near the university, and he shows me some techniques. And just doing the techniques interested me a lot, because it's very mechanical and
problem solving.
Yeah,
natural.
Yeah, and there's nothing fluffy around it. It's you put your arm there because it traps their leg, and it's very pragmatic.
Yeah. Real-time feedback.
Real-time feedback.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then at the end, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so if your listeners don't know, it's a grappling-based martial art. So it's kind of wrestling, but the idea is you end the fight via a submission, so putting your opponent in a position where they have to tap and end. And in jiu-jitsu, you roll, which is sparring pretty much every class, because there's not the chance of a knockout or anything really bad happening to you. So we rolled, me and the friend at the end of the session, and I can't describe how he kicked my ass. Like it was, it was
just a joke.
Just a joke, yeah. And he was 10 steps ahead the whole time. It was like a 200-kilo blanket on top of me. It was horrendous. And somewhere in that chaos, I just figured I need to learn. I need to learn what this guy knows, because it's not his size or anything that's doing this. It's his technique.
I think a lot of that with combat sports, and to give you a bit of context, and our listeners, because we haven't really spoken about this, Alex, you do some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu yourself.
Josh was the one that got me into it.
Yeah, there you go. I used to do some boxing at amateur level as well. And so I think, that kind of whole size thing within any discipline of pugilism or martial arts is that it's complete bullshit. Like, you know, that's why you see some of like the street fights. You got the rugby lad or the weightlifter, you know, going up against an actual boxer or something. You know, they tend to lose that fight because it's nothing to do with size.
Does that give you a confidence, knowing that you have that ability and it doesn't really matter what the guy looks like or not?
Maybe a false one for me. Because one thing it does teach you is, you don't know what people are capable of, and
that's the big thing.
Yeah,
the best form of self-defense is not to engage. Because unless you absolutely have to, it's a last resort, right? So I wouldn't say it gives me confidence. It gives me more of a humility in terms of how I move in the world. Because
I think that is confidence, though.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it definitely gives you confidence. I think being able to, or having a skill or understanding the skill of how to defend yourself or even use your body in a defensive manner, because, you know, like you say, Alex, we really don't know what people know, you know, and like I'm a relatively big guy, you know, I'm 6'2" and whatever. Some people will look at me and think, oh, he's a big lad, but, you know, they don't know that I may have had some combat experience. It's one of them ones where, you know, even though I'm big, I don't think that it's like my size that really matters. It's what I may have learned in the past.
Yeah.
But I definitely think like walking into a room or, you know, walking, you know, in a bar or something, I definitely think that there is an element of confidence that you get from it.
Yeah, maybe I was too dismissive of it, but like, I guess from the perspective that you regularly put yourself in compromising situations.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So if you are in, I don't know, Siri wants to talk. If you are in, I don't know, a board meeting or you're speaking to particularly high level people or what have you, even on a night out or in a restaurant or whatever it may be, whatever happens, you know, you've, I guess, prepared for it. Like someone once said to me, again, without, I say this in jest, but we were talking about, it was actually you, I think, jiu-jitsu and kind of how often or not often I was doing it. And you said, it's better to be a soldier in a garden than a gardener in a war.
I did say that.
So I guess it gives you that degree of confidence, or at least a false one, in my case, perhaps.
I mean, that's a Jordan Peterson line as well.
I've seen it on some samurai artwork somewhere, so I don't know where it came from.
Love that.
But
love that.
Staying on jiu-jitsu, what role do you think it's played in your development as an individual?
I don't know. So for me, there's no rational reason. I don't train to be fit. I don't train for the confidence. I don't train for self-defense. I love the art. Like I've never come across anything as complicated as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's given me a hobby outside of work, something which frankly takes up more of my mental space than it should, but it really is an escapist thing for me. It's the best stress relief in the world. You can't leave a jiu-jitsu class and still be thinking about work. When got a 200 kilo guy trying to choke you out. You're not stressed about your meeting the next day.
Well, it's very
anymore.
cathartic, isn't it? It's almost meditative because in that moment there is nothing else but the defense that you, or offensive that you can think about, really.
To a primal level, like as someone that's experienced it. Like,
you don't even realize that you're doing it. You just like switch into like a completely different zone. Yeah. You know, everything else it's like instinctive.
I think that's probably the role it's played, is the escapism. It's such a break from the day-to-day stresses for that reason. You're not anywhere but in the present when you're training.
So it sounds fantastic, and I'm really pleased to see how seriously you've taken it, because we trained together maybe about 7 years ago, but I was playing lots of football at the time. So I came back to it a bit later, but you've been very consistent with it, and you're obviously doing very well there and competing at times, which it's great to see.
Amazing, yeah.
Really good to have that almost like counterweight to the stresses of work, I'm sure, in your life.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Josh.
I think that's super important, having something to commit to which isn't your day-to-day.
Yeah.
You can get very insular, and it's a strange environment, the corporate setting in a place like London. Having that, my training partners, not one of them even knows what I do. They don't care what I do. It's not what we talk about. All we talk about is jiu-jitsu. That's such a and similarly with work. In fact, my new boss, she loves MMA, which is amazing. I had a big old scratch on my head, and we had to go for some drinks, and she came over and said, "Josh, I got to ask, what's happening?" And I explained, and she's a massive fan. So,
is there something going on at home?
Yeah. You can sleep in the office if you want.
We shouldn't joke about.
Yeah, it's not a matter to laugh about, but No, that's really cool. And just one point I wanted to make as well is, I think particularly in those environments like your job, where you have to deal with either senior executives, or you're in quite high intensity or pressure environments, or meetings, I find that going into that and sort of having that group of people, you can kind of pinpoint the ones that are either like hold their emotions well, or know how to breathe properly. They're doing something. Like the people that carry themselves well and can sort of maintain their composure and speak well through difficult conversations, they have some sort of discipline, whether it is martial arts or some sort of combat sport that they participate in, or even like a sport, or they meditate or something, because you need to work on that generally. And they're generally the people as well that kind of maintain eye contact and things like that, And I think you almost connect on a different level, and there's almost like a connection that you don't realize you have. As opposed to the people that maybe get quite flustered, quite stressed, raise their voice, all that kind of stuff, or lose sight of their emotions. I think it's quite clear the ones that do and the ones that don't. And that's, I would imagine, comes across quite well in when you work, and when you deal with people. I'd imagine the BJJ definitely helps with that.
The best people in work all have something else going on. You can't be a one-trick pony. They all have side hustles. They sit on boards somewhere. They've got a hobby. They sail. They whatever.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Like you meet someone in a pub, and if all they can tell you about is asset management, it's interesting, but.
For a time,
and it's not even that interesting. But you need to have. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We're all working together in a company with other human beings. You want to have interesting people around you, and if you have other things in your life which help you in a conversation, not about work, then it can be a career advantage as well, for sure.
You need to be able to tell a story.
Absolutely. And I really like that you touched upon that, because certainly something I'm aware of, like in terms of that deeper connection. And it doesn't even need to be that I'm only going to connect with people that say do jiu-jitsu or played football growing. It's someone that's passionate about something. You can share that passion across borders almost, and connect on that deeper level whilst developing yourself outside of work.
And it, during this is, I think, a bit of a lesson for our listeners as well. Once they get into their careers, or perhaps they already in their careers and struggling with relationships, it's like, you never know who you're going to meet at the water cooler or at the coffee machine, and you want to be able to sort of say, if they ask you what have you been up to on the weekend, you don't want to always say, oh, I was just working, or I was reading emails, or what, like, oh, I did this. And you never know, it could spark up a conversation of, oh my God, you do British Jiu-Jitsu. I do that as well. Where do you train? Oh, I know so and so.
Or even my son does that. Or
exactly. You never know, how that will help your relationship.
I'm not exaggerating. The amount of times I've gone into the office with marks on my face, and that's and it started a conversation with people who I wouldn't speak to otherwise. It's
come in with like dark glasses on.
Yeah, I got a story about that as well, but not for this.
So just on the topic of telling a story, we like to give our listeners a bit of an insight into our guests' backgrounds, sort of more personal background. So would you mind giving us a bit of a background, a bit of an explanation to like your familial background, how you grew up, what was the socioeconomic sort of aspect of it?
So I've had a weird one. So my dad, so he grew up like very, very poor in Turkey in the 50s, 60s. So I can't imagine that, you go to parts of Turkey now and it's very, very poor, let alone 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he grew up there, but he was one of seven kids, did very well in school and got a scholarship to come to Newcastle University to do a degree. And then he ended up doing a PhD after that, still at Newcastle. And when he was there, he met my mum, who's English, and I think my mum was 19 when they met, and they've been together since. So long time. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It's great to have that archetype at home. Then we grew up, and we grew up in a pretty rough area in Reading until I was about 11, 12, and then we moved to a nicer area. It's hard. I didn't really notice these things at the time, but I think my dad got like a promotion or did well at work around that time, and we got some more money. So moved to a different house, and so we've been comfortable since then. And I've got an older brother who works in finance, and he's done very, very well. So we're comfortable now.
And where did your mum come from?
So she's from Liverpool.
Okay.
So again, her dad was a bin man, like pretty poor background. And again, Liverpool in the 60s isn't always the most prosperous place. So I think it was tough. But
and educationally, you indicated that socially and economically, like, although you may have started in perhaps more humble beginnings, like through your dad's kind of career journey, things improved. But did you go to a private, state school, independent? Like what was that? State school?
State grammar.
Okay.
And my mum's a teacher, and she has strong views about private schools. But she would not let me go to a private school no matter what. And I don't think she'd let me send my kids to a private school. But we were lucky in that we had a good grammar school nearby, so we had an option. And I know it's difficult if you don't have that grammar option, then it's tough to not send them to private.
And you mentioned your brother. Any other siblings at all?
Yeah, young. So I've got older brother, younger sister. I'm the middle child.
Okay.
We are super close. We were talking about this last night. They're
it's that culmination of like Turkish family background and Northern English, like very close knit, very close knit. But from both sides, family I think is very important.
Where are you from?
I was born in Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we moved over when I was 5 and lived here for almost 30 years now.
So both your parents are Ukrainian?
Both my parents. I was born there. We immigrated in '93. As a family.
There's Russian and Ukraine spoken in Ukraine, right?
Yes.
Do you speak either?
I speak Russian.
Nice.
And this is like a topic for a whole other time. But because I was born in '88, right? So it was like the end of the Soviet era.
Wow,
we moved over sort of like just after the Soviet Union collapsed, and Russian was a compulsory language. The politics around that, obviously, now you can see with the conflict that's going on, the sort of Russian speaking in Ukraine being sort of eliminated. It's a big problem. Ukrainian is, for me to hear someone speaking Ukrainian is like them speaking Polish. Like I can understand the gist, but I can't fully understand it, and I can't speak it. My mum can speak both.
Okay, wow.
So yeah, there is that.
Are you a fluent Russian speaker then?
Yeah, I can speak Russian.
So we were talking about Dostoevsky last night, and a friend of mine is just got a translation in Spanish of of Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
And I've read it in English, and I've heard so many times that you can't appreciate it unless you're a native Russian speaker.
The funny thing is, because you start school at like 7 years old there, so I didn't actually go to school. So my reading is really basic, and I can't write.
Okay.
So I can speak, right? So I would love to read it in Russian. It'd probably take me about 10 years. So I've got the English translation.
Amazing.
So I guess we've learned about your kind of beginnings, and you clearly come from quite humble beginnings. Your parents started like from ground up, but gave you guys fantastic opportunities and opened a lot of doors for you, because sounds like you're all absolutely killing it now. What were some of the key principles that your parents had instilled in you, maybe even like your grandparents if you were close to them, like that they really put into the forefront for you growing up?
The biggest, I think, was family first. We always prioritized the family. Like my dad's very family oriented. My mum's very family oriented. That was it. There was that, and appreciation for education. So given my dad's background,
I was going to say this probably came from dad's side, right?
Yeah. He clearly gets or appreciates the fact of having an education, and that's always been instilled in us as well. So I think they're the two main things, but I'd emphasize the former. I think that's why we're happy, and my brother's doing well, my sister's doing well. Is
brilliant.
We have each other. It's a very tight knit group, and that sends you leaps and bounds. You're not worried about other things.
You never feel alone.
You never feel alone.
Which is really important. I think. Yeah.
No, and from speaking to you separately to this, it comes across like you grew up in a very loving environment as well. Like and I think we reflect on this, like mindful of the fact that that's not a given necessarily. And as we kind of look at the next stage of our lives, it's something to certainly reflect on in terms of how can you foster that sort of environment if you do have children and bring them up in the most loving environment? Because I always joked with you about
pay it forward, right?
100%. But I always joke with Josh and say I need to get notes off your parents, because by the sounds of things, like the siblings get on really well. They're all getting on well in their respective careers, and they all have a very positive relationship with the parents, which isn't always a given. But yeah, we've touched upon your kind of family background and some of the key principles, but it'd be interesting to also hear about whether there are any key influences in your development. So parents, siblings, any mentors perhaps, or if you kind of have done it alone almost. That'd be good to hear.
I have. So I've always struggled with getting a mentor, and I'd love to get some advice if I only had a mentor on how to do that, because I've never built that relationship with someone in the work setting where, it's a weird hybrid between kind of friend but colleague. I've never been good at that, and I wish I had been better. And I try and serve that role for mentees where I can, but I've never been good at getting a mentor. And again, my brother's been an influence for sure. And he.
What's the age gap?
17 months. So he's
okay.
not too much.
Not too much.
Yeah, but he's I've always looked to him and not necessarily wanted to do what he's done, but he just sets a good example.
Yeah,
him for sure. And another one, I'd say my jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah.
More so than anyone at work. He's a very kind of, I respect him a lot. And not that I really confide in him or we talk about issues together, but
it's the energy.
It's the energy. Yeah, you need to meet. Have you met him, Jude?
No, I haven't. I might have met him like really briefly when I was much younger, when I came along for the first session.
It's the energy.
Just on that, I think what I'd really like to stress is that doesn't matter what age you are now, or maybe you have kids, like seriously consider either participating in or introducing your kids, male, female, doesn't matter, to some sort of martial art or boxing, because stereotypes aside, where people might think it's violent and primitive and stuff, you actually learn so much even just going into a gym and just observing, because the amount of discipline you learn, control, like respect, for the hierarchy, humility, it's just like seeing the kids in the boxing gym as well. They come in and they initially could be quite energetic, or could be a little bit disrespectful to their elders or whatever, but like they learn that, and you see it over the course of a period of time. They soon start to like understand like how hierarchy works, and it's just like a discipline thing. And thinking about when they go into, say, the adult world, you need to know how to navigate that, and you need to know how to play the game almost, but just have respect for others, and respect people that are older than you, maybe have a bit more wisdom and stuff. And and on top of that, you gain the confidence, and you learn how to defend yourself. It's not about being aggressive. So I would just hugely recommend it.
My kids are definitely going. If they don't like it, they don't like it. But they have to try it.
They have to try it.
And I notice I train with some 15, 16-year-olds. They all act like they're 25. Every single one of them. It's really makes them more mature and grown up and respectful. And
definitely.
I'd love my kids to love it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point to make, and I fully agree. Any children I have will at least go to one class. Yeah. And I think one of the good things about it, especially when you spar, is you're just having to deal with yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's okay, in your case, maybe you've been tagged in the face. What do you do about it?
Yeah. And like, this is the key lesson was, the angrier you get, the worse you become, the worse you perform. And it's like a lesson in itself. Like, you need to control yourself. You need to take breaths. You need to like move. Yeah. Think clearly. You can't be clouded by anger.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just on kind of back to Josh, because we keep going back to jiu-jitsu, which I'm sure we can talk about for hours.
That is me.
But in terms of like giving back, you mentioned mentoring. Do you give back regularly, and why is it important for you to do so if you do?
So I give back I give some money to charity each month, mainly because my dad's been involved in Amnesty for my whole life, so I've always had an attachment there. But mostly by the mentoring, and I just think it's so important. Like there is such another quote: "What if the cure for cancer is trapped in the mind of a starving African child?" That always kind of sticks in my mind. There's so much talent out there, which, if even from a purely commercial capitalist business perspective, you want to tap that pool of talent as much as you possibly can if you're going to be a successful, high-performing firm. Let alone the social benefit of giving people who otherwise would have no option to enter this kind of world have access to it. I think it just makes sense to do that, and if it just takes a little bit of guidance and knowledge which they just don't have because of their familial background, whatever, then I'm more than happy to spend some time to fill that gap and equalize the playing field is really what it is, and we should all try and do that.
Removing barriers to entry, as Alex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very competition-focused term. So, Yannick, I don't know if you wanted to ask your special questions.
Before we wrap up, just a couple of questions that we like to ask our guests. So, if you could, would you go back to a particular point in time to change an event, or go to a particular point in the future to see an event?
See an event. I'm not meddling with the past. Have you seen Butterfly Effect? It doesn't end well. I'd rather go see something which I might miss otherwise.
Any particular event
in the future,
or a particular point in time?
As far forward in the future as possible. I hope humans are still around.
Yeah.
I hope.
Okay.
Maybe multiplanetary if Elon has his way. We'll see.
That sounds good.
And then, the other thing we'd be interested in hearing is the best piece of advice you've received in terms of like your biggest and that might relate to your biggest life lesson. And then what advice you would say give your 18-year-old self? It might be the same, but yeah, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Maybe you go back in time and give them that.
I remember my brother saying to me before, I think it was before the interview, which I failed, so it clearly didn't help. But he said, don't go in and feel like you're trying to impress them. Let them try and impress you. And I mean, he's wrong in a sense. In an interview, you're trying to impress them, but the mentality of, think what they can do for you. You're not there to serve them. You're there to do something together. That was good advice and has helped me in circumstances other than that interview.
With a partnership in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not like me or them. It's having the partnership in mind.
I'm not here with my hat out begging for a job.
Yeah.
It's like, is this going to work? And have that confidence. And then the advice I'd give is don't let imposter syndrome get you, because it's definitely got me. And don't waste your time worrying if you're as good as the others. They have very stringent interview processes for a reason. You're just as good as everyone else there, and don't ever think otherwise.
Yeah. You're there for a reason, essentially.
Yeah.
And doing what you're doing.
They don't hire you by mistake. It's a big cost to them to do that.
Yeah.
They're not going to mess it up.
Absolutely.
I'll be taking that one on board myself as I start my new job and career. And then you've referred to Crime and Punishment, but are there any other particularly formative books you've read which you would recommend, say, to a younger audience, and then maybe people around the early 30s mark? Just because I know you can probably talk about Nietzsche and stuff, but anything that you think would also be good and accessible for say, some of our younger listeners.
There's so many good books.
And actually, why is reading so important, do you think?
I don't know if it is important. I love it. I find it very escapist, cathartic. Nothing takes me on a journey like reading a book does. And it's a good way of accessing others' knowledge. You read their thoughts.
Helps open up your own as well.
Helps open up your own. Yeah, it's true. But it depends. I mean, I think fiction and non-fiction are completely different. I have a very different experience reading non-fiction books versus fiction. I actually prefer fiction. But I would say that what formative books, The Cellist of Sarajevo, amazing book. And it's about the Bosnian War and true story. It's a fiction book, but a true story about a street where there was a queue for bread and a shell hit and killed, I think it was 21 people. And a cellist came and then played at the same time the shell hit each day for the next 21 days, played a piece of music. And there's a whole story around him and the other characters. But it's just a fascinating book. Probably teaches you a bit about the Bosnian War, which I don't know enough about, and we definitely should, because it was not that long ago in Europe. Yeah. That's an amazing book. Shake Hands with the Devil is another one about the
Rwandan genocide.
Rwandan genocide in the UNHCR, the refugee arm. Failure to respond, and it's the head of the UNHCR delegation to Rwanda wrote the book, and it's fascinating seeing the role of the public sector, but the complete failing in the face of one of the worst atrocities, which was only about
not that long.
30 years ago. I think just in our lifetimes. Fascinating book. Really good book. That may be for the older.
I was going to say, for the younger listeners.
Game of Thrones. I just finished all of the amazing, the best written series of books.
Oh, really? I haven't read them. Yeah.
I know it's a cliche, but they're so good. They're so good.
Sounds good.
Very good.
Anything else, Josh? You wanted to? Sorry, not Josh. Alex, you wanted to touch on?
Any 3 dinner guests and why? From history as well, if you can, very quickly. Who comes to mind?
Ataturk, Paul Kagame, who stopped the Rwandan genocide, and he's in the book I just mentioned. He's now the president of Rwanda. Amazing guy. Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
I mean, imagine the shit he can tell you about.
God, can you imagine?
different breed of people. Amazing.
For sure.
Well, that's everything from me. I know I've learned a lot about asset management, even got some things to reflect on in terms of going into my new career. And I think this will be really helpful for our listeners. I don't know if you had any other questions at all.
No more questions from me. Just wanted to thank you for joining us, Josh. It's been a super interesting conversation. Lots to take away. I think our listeners will benefit greatly from it, not just professionally, but also personally. We talked about PJJ. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Absolutely. No, thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
My
Josh.
pleasure.
And
Awesome.
listen, again, as we always say, like, comment, subscribe. Hard Work Beats Talent podcast on all the platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff. So please follow us, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Over and out.